Hello, my name is Russell James, and I am completing the Summative Project Part 2, the critique on a lesson that we did from this past year. Before I get started, I would like to apologize for the issue with me uploading my video last Sunday. I did upload the video to live text. I did it at my house, and the internet, I use a hotspot on my phone. I'm not sure if that was the issue, why it did not completely submit. I'm not sure what the issue was there, but once I submitted the video, I had to erase it from my phone to clear up storage so I could do some other things with it. And because of that, now I am redoing the assignment, and I'm going to do it now, and I'm going to attempt to upload it to YouTube, and we'll see if we can make it happen from there. I just wanted to apologize for that before I get started. But looking at the lessons from last year, I decided to use one from my AP Human Geography class, and it revolves around what we call the von Thunen model. Johann von Thunen was a German economist who lived back in the 1800s, and he married into some money, and his wife's family had a bunch of land. And obviously farming was still big. This is in Germany. So farming was still big. It was part of the economy. It was part of the culture during that time frame. So he began to look at his own farm, and he also began to look at farms around his area to determine what was the best location for certain styles of crop in relation to the city centers. The central business districts, wherever the cities were, and he began to build a pattern based on what styles of agriculture were found at certain locations relevant to the city. For example, dairy products. Where are the dairy farms located when you look at the city centers? Where are the grain stock and livestock? Where's the crop fields? Where's the timber? And so on and so forth. And he began to build to put some of these similarities together, and he ended up creating a model, and it's called the von Thunen model. And it's a very interesting model. The students tend to enjoy learning about it because it's the way I present it. It's a little bit of a critical thinking activity, and they also have a chance to explain the reasons why they think certain styles of agriculture were found where they were, so on and so forth. But he created the model in 1826. And again, he was looking at trying to increase profits on his own farm, and that led him to studying agriculture in Europe, and very influential when we talk about the where and the why for agriculture in the world. So my lesson begins with an activator where I give the students a blank copy of the von Thunen model, and this is what it would look like. Right there, that is the blank model. The actual model looks like this, and it describes where each is located in relationship to the city center right here in the middle. As you can see, dairy farms are always located closest because dairy is a perishable product. It spoils very quickly, so the dairy farmers had to live close to the city center in order to get their product to market to sell. The forest is in ring number 2 outside of the city. Lumber, especially back in those days and still even today, was used for structures. It was used for burning. It was their source of fuel and power, and they needed a lot of it, so it needed to be close to the city. It's also very heavy, and still true today is the heavier something is, the more expensive and the more difficult it is to transport. So the forest was normally located in ring 2. Grain and field crops were located here in zone number 3. They need a little bit more land, and they're not very difficult to transport. Farmers can easily load their products up onto carts and easily get them to the city center. And last but not least is the ranch and livestock located in the last circle. This is the circle that needs the most room, because the livestock need a lot of room to graze, and when it comes to transport, they're very easy to transport because they can walk. So all the farmer has to do is walk the cattle to the city center in order to sell. So that's the von Thunen model. So the first thing I do in this lesson is introduce the students to the von Thunen model by giving them a blank document like this, and the answers, the little answer key is up here on the right. And what I do from there is I make the students choose what zone they think those styles of agriculture go in, and they have to explain it. That is the activator. It takes 10-15 minutes, and they have to give good explanations. From there, the lesson is very basic. It's it's an introduction lesson. I do this as one of the first lessons in the agricultural unit. So from here, I do not give the students the answers yet. I let them work on this for a few minutes, for 10 minutes or so, and then bam, we move on into a PowerPoint. And we're going to come back to this model at the end of the period for about 15, 20 minutes to finish up a little activity with it. But right from here, we go into a PowerPoint, introducing things that will be relevant in days to come. Again, this is an introduction lesson. For the next week, we are doing projects based on the information we are going over today. And the projects vary from group assignments to individual assignments to posters, informative visuals, and so on and so forth. And but anyway, we go into talking about the birth of agriculture with the Neolithic Revolution. The Neolithic Revolution is when people began to transfer from hunting and gathering to actual farming, and it changed society altogether. During the Paleolithic era, which was the nomadic hunter-gatherer era in human history, humans never settled down. They were always chasing food, always chasing food. Their settlements were very quick, very primitive, because they never stayed in one place for a long period of time. When they realized they could farm and cultivate crops, that allowed them to stay in a more permanent location by bringing the food to them. And this led to the domestication of animals, so on and so forth. We have some time during this, talking about the Neolithic Revolution, when I asked students, what do you think the impact of this was? How would this affect human history? And we talk about that for a few minutes. We talk about just some of the big events that took place as far as the history of agriculture. The Second Agricultural Revolution. This is when, the Second Agricultural Revolution was tied in with the Industrial Revolution, where the tools used for agriculture really got an upgrade. We went from using hand plows to tractors, and you can just really see the influence of the Industrial Revolution as the resources for farmers began to increase from a technological standpoint. And that leads us to farming for a profit. That going from farming for yourself, that farming for your family to survive, transitioning to farming for a profit. That's actually your job. That's how you make money. So that leads us back to the von Thunen model at the end of the PowerPoint. And now, what I normally do is I'll go ahead and give the students the correct answers, and then I'll let them get into small groups and discuss and come up with reasonings why the correct answers are correct. And so they get up, they get to move around the class a little bit, they sit down with a small group, and they discuss why these right answers are correct. And that leads us right into the end of the lesson. The last 5 minutes of class, I ask the students, tell me your reasonings why, and we have a little class discussion to end the lesson. And that's the first lesson that I give in the agricultural unit in AP Human Geography. And now I'm going to look at it from von Thunen's point of view. And I'm sorry, not von Thunen, but Jerome Bruner, my theorist. I'm going to look at this and critique it from Jerome Bruner's standpoint. And I do believe that Jerome Bruner would like my use of critical thinking in the activator. I think he would enjoy my lesson, but at the same time, I think he would want me to make some revisions. And I'll talk about those revisions now. Again, he was big on problem solving, big on intuition, the use of culture, and I really do think he would want the students to explain the explanations as far as where those different styles of agriculture. I think he would want me to put a little bit more into the explanation. Instead of just having the students explain why their choices were correct, I think he would want me to add some type of cultural relevance into factor there. And I'll come back to that in a minute, because I have another idea of what Jerome Bruner would tell me to do. I think he would want me to add a little bit more critical thinking into it. I think he would acknowledge the critical thinking at the beginning of the beginning of the lesson, but I think there was not enough for him. I think he would want me to put a little bit more critical thinking, a little bit more problem solving into this lesson. And there are several different ways I could do that. In reading his text, The Process of Education, and reading about his MAKOS project, that's a course of study that ties right in with history, which is what I teach. and the culture of education. He wrote The Process of Education in the 1960s, and it was a game changer as far as education is concerned, about students being ready to learn difficult material at a young age. This is just one example he gave in. He thinks that a lot of times the school systems waste too much time with students, assuming that they are not ready for more advanced material. And Jerome Bruner was big on the fact that if it's presented correctly, it can be a great way to get students to learn intuition, to learn critical thinking and problem-solving skills at an early age. Some other things that Jerome, that he was big on were things like spiral curriculum, and I'll get to more of that in just a minute. But yes, he would want me to more critical thinking in my lesson, and I think I have a way of doing that with adding another concept into this lesson and make the students compare and contrast two different models. I've started off with the von Thunen model, but there's another model called the bid-rent theory that also applies to the location of farms, the location of businesses. And without going into too much detail on the bid rent, the bid rent explains that the cost of land gets more expensive the closer to the central business district that you get. So the closer to downtown, whatever city you're closest to, the downtown, as you get closer to downtown, the more expensive the land becomes. And I think we could tie that in with the von Thunen model as far as where certain styles of agriculture are found in relation to the city center. And, the bid rent, I've thought about this a lot lately, and I really do think I'm going to do this next year, is bring the bid rent and make the students compare and contrast the bid rent theory and link it to the von Thunen model. This will also be an example of spiral curriculum, which I believe von Thunen would be in favor of, because he was a big advocate of spiral curriculum, teaching something and then coming back to it and adding more layers on top of it, And I think he would enjoy that approach. But some things that Jerome Bruner would like, and what he would see and think are positives in my lessons. I'm just going to go through a list of what he would think would be positives of my lesson. The critical thinking, as I stated before. I always try to bring content into discussions that we've already talked about. And, anytime we do group discussions, I try to bring information in that we talked about in previous units, and that is the spiral curriculum, which he was a big advocate of. So I think he would like that. He wrote a lot about development and stages of development, and he was not necessarily one where as a child you're in this stage and then you reach a certain cognitive stage, a certain level of cognitive development, and you enter the next stage. He wrote about three main stages of cognitive development as far as students are concerned, and adults for that matter. And although there are some links to certain grades and certain age levels with these with these stages of learning, they're not tied to those stages. For example, the three stages are inactive, iconic, and symbolic. And inactive is action-based, and a lot of times young children are action-based as far as their learning. If you look like at a baby with a little shaker, if you take the shaker away, they're still going to be making the movement. So that's action-based. But adults can also be inactive learners, action-based learners. So that was one unique thing about Bruner, is he never tied individuals to specific stages as far as their cognitive development is concerned. It was more open to interpretation, however you learn the best. The iconic stage is image-based, and obviously I have images here, and symbolic is language-based. And I think he would see those three in this one lesson. The inactive, the action-based, the students being able to get up and move around the room at the end of the lesson, working in groups to formulate their best descriptions for why the certain styles of agriculture are found where they are in his model, in the von Thunen model. I have iconic with the use of the model itself. It is an image, and that is what we really concentrate the lesson around. And other images found within the PowerPoint. And then symbolic is language-based, and obviously there's going to be explanation taking place as I explain these different concepts to the students. So I believe he would like that. I believe he would acknowledge that I have his three different stages of learning within this one lesson. Um, and another concept that I read with Jerome Bruner was something called discovery learning. I believe that personally ties in with intuition, and I do believe that those students who correctly guessed the von Thunen model, I think they will experience some of that discovery learning as we're moving forward throughout the lesson. Not every student would obviously experience that, but I do believe the ones that were able to correctly guess the model in the activator, I think they will have a example of discovery learning. So the big changes that I would make after Jerome Bruner gave me his advice, I would make the students explain a little bit more into their activator, and I would create an assignments where the students had to explain the bid rent and the von Thunen model. I would take a little bit more time in the activator to introduce the bid rent. It's a very simple model, and by doing so, I'm also going to be coming back to the bid rent in the next unit. That's where I really dive into the bid rent. So I'll be introducing it there. It'll be coming up later. Again, that's spiral curriculum, but adding something more into it as far as the students having to link these two together, and I believe that would be a big change I would make early on. And I will also add a little bit more as far as the model itself. The von Thunen model has been used outside of agriculture. It has been used in industry and economics to explain why certain things are found where they are. And I would give a blank von Thunen model to the students and have them link something to it. They could link music to it. They could link food, hobbies, sports, whatever the case is. I would leave this open to interpretation and let the students bring some of their culture into play. Jerome Bruner didn't speak a lot about the culture of the students until he wrote The Culture of Education in the 1990s. And when he wrote The Culture of Education, it was almost like a look at his life's work. He kind of looked back at his life's work. He made a couple little adjustments, but one thing he brought into light was cultural relevance. I mean, you got to be culturally relevant to your students if you're expecting them to learn, and that was a big part of the culture of education. And this is a way I could link the students' culture into this lesson. I could allow them as an extra credit assignment or even a project itself to create their own von Thunen model and link a part of their culture to it. Whatever they enjoy about their lives, link it to a von Thunen model. Just certain restaurants being closer to the inner. If a student likes going to restaurants, certain restaurants being located closer to the city center, certain other styles of restaurants being located a little bit further away. Whatever the case is, there's different styles of music in relation to the city center and why. That's just a couple examples I could build on for the students to kind of take it and run. And again, I believe this will allow the students to bring their culture more into play throughout this lesson. Do I think these changes are appropriate? Yes. Anytime you're getting the students to critically think more in a lesson, I believe those are appropriate changes. And with the addition of the bid rent theory into the activator, and not only making the students guess these certain locations for these styles of agriculture, but also making the students link the von Thunen model and the bid rent theory, making them link them two together, I think would really up the critical thinking and problem solving for this lesson. And again, bringing their culture into play at the end, having them create their own von Thunen model with a cultural, relevant idea. That's going to do nothing but increase student engagement. The more you can relate to your students, the more engaged they will be with you. And this gives the opportunity for that. It really does. It gives the opportunity for that. So, as far as what I've learned thus far with these concepts and these ideas throughout this assignment and other assignments, how am I going to apply that to my school, the faculty members in my school? And some key concepts I've picked up thus far. Culture, something we've been working on a good bit so far in the class is being more culturally responsive to our students in the classroom, trying to bring in, from my point of view, Our job as teachers is to bring culturally relevant material into the lessons as much as possible. I've seen this, I've done this in class, and I think this is something I can bring to the common planning meetings in my department and with other faculty members, is bringing culturally relevant material into the classroom to engage the students more. Problem solving. Critical thinking. We must do better at getting our students to problem solve. We must do better at getting our students to critically think. And as Jerome Bruner described, these students are not too young or not at a certain cognitive stage of development where they cannot handle more critical thinking work. And as long as it's presented correctly by us teachers, that we can get the students critically thinking. Again, just the whole relevance of culture, critical thinking. I mean, I've got a bunch of ideas that I'm going to bring to the table in a couple of days when we come back for school. So I'm looking forward to it. But I hope this answered the question, and have a nice day.